Hey y'all, how are your hairs? When I say your hairs, I'm talking about the ones on your head, and for fellas and also folks of the non-binary who happen to have beards, I'm talking to you too. How are those strands doing? Do they need some help? Do they look like all my life I had to fight? Well, I actually have a solution for you. You need to go on over to Distribution Homes Wholesale and search for D&H Organic Hair Care. You want to know why? Because I've been using it, and I have to say, I was very surprised by the masculine scents that the pH balanced moisturizing shampoo and the conditioner did to my hair. I would also like to say that the smell itself also created a very nice ambiance in my bathroom. So I got the kit. So I got the shampoo and the conditioner. I got the High Shine Glossifier, which smells just like the conditioner and the shampoo. It smells so amazing. I also received the transition conditioner for those of you who haven't quite come over, to the curl side. We got something in there for you as well. And last but certainly not least, what I know is people's personal favorite is the Organic Renew Finishing Oil. And I like it too. So if you want your bathroom, your hair to smell like Idris Elba's bed sheets, I suggest you purchase this kit. I suggest you purchase all the products the D&H Organic Hair Care sells. Do you know why? Because first of all, it's Black owned and it's 100% vegan. They make everything themselves to help our hair, our beautiful, varied hair. So one more time, go on over to distributionhomeswholesale.com and find D&H Organic Hair Care. And for my listeners, you can receive a 10% discount if you use the code CRP10, and it's good from now until March the 26th. So one more time, CRP10. Tell them the Crossroads Podcast sent you. Now let's start the show. Hello, everyone. Welcome or welcome back to another episode of The Crossroads. As you can see, things are changing around here. So we are going to talk more about the bills that I said I was not going to get all deep into. I know I've lied to you, but most importantly, I've lied to myself. So there's a few more bills that I found that I want to talk about that are going on in the current legislative session here in the state of Maryland. Some of them are they're social justice related, of course, the actual no-knock search warrant. And also we're bringing in another piece of the police accountability conversation, talking about police dogs. Today, police officers say police dogs are necessary because of the uncertainty about the suspects that they are in pursuit of in a home, who's living or who is lurking in a private premise. And you will know that when we think about police dogs, we're also taking a trip back in time, right? Because we're talking about the 1960s and the civil rights movement. And we've seen the images of innocent protesters being attacked by police dogs. So put that in your pipe. So that's what we're talking about today. But before we get there, we are going to give some flowers. So as I mentioned on the last episode, I'm highlighting 3 people who have been very impactful to me and as a result of their support, well, not so much of their support. What I found from them is really inspiration. And the first person was Petey Green. And the second person for this episode is going to be Kathy Hughes. She is the founder and CEO of Radio One, and that made her the first Black woman to head a publicly traded company. Radio One has since become Urban One, and it's one of the largest, or is the largest, excuse me. It is the largest African-American owned broadcast company in the United States. Kathy got her start at Howard. She was lecturing at the School of Communications. She went on to become the sales manager of Howard's radio station, WHUR. She's the creator of The Quiet Storm, which was a popular R&B radio show with like really amazing real old school R&B vibes. And, Kathy is a philanthropist, she's a pioneer, and she is someone I grew up with and someone that I respect. So I'm giving her flowers today. So let's talk about some of the bills that are being introduced right now in Maryland's legislative session. And I'm going to give you the bill numbers and other information. So if you want to look this up on your own time, I suggest that you do it. And of course, because I've made now an unspoken promise to keep track of all these damn bills, I'm going to be doing the same. So let's get straight to it. We have House Bill 670, which is called the Police Reform and Accountability Act of 2021. It has been sponsored by Delegate Adrian Jones. And in this bill is the repeal of the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights. And I have personally talked about this on this show before, and I have also encouraged folks to take a look at this. This document in particular is very important to repeal, as it gives police officers a lot of opportunity to not be held accountable for their behavior and their actions. And there's a few other aspects of this bill. It also places Baltimore City police management in the hands of the city of Baltimore, not the state. It also has updated language, if that's what you even want to call it, around the no-knock search warrant. And what I mean by updated language is it basically says that they will still be issued, but under certain circumstances. And if you're wondering what those circumstances are, if you're just curious what that could be, it's very discretionary. It's very much so if the police officer or police officers feel that there is some threat to their lives, that they are, that they feel that there is something that could happen to them by entering this premise, they would feel that a no-knock search warrant is merited. And last but certainly not least, this also offers public education, free public education or tuition, for college for individuals who want to become police officers. Next bill is House Bill 139. That's called the Law Enforcement Officers' Use of Force. It's been cross-filed, Senate Bill 626. It's currently pending in the House Judiciary Committee, and it has been sponsored by a few delegates. In essence, this allows someone to seek relief for use of force by a police officer, and this person can file a civic action in court. So previously that was not allowed. So this bill is seeking to address that. Just another one we want to keep our eyes out on. Next is House Bill 671. This is the Public Information Personnel Investigatory Records Complaints Against Police Officers, also sponsored by Delegate Adrian Jones. And this bill does a few things. First, it allows for access to certain personnel records, police personnel records, by the U.S. Attorney, Attorney General, and other state court officers. It also establishes a record of formal complaints of misconduct against a police officer. So these records would not be part of a personnel record and could be posted on the Maryland Police Training and Standards Commission, like on that particular website, and also could be used or requested and be sent to the General Assembly if that is something that is asked. So taking a step back and going back a little bit to the no-knock warrant. So, all of us are very familiar at this point with Breonna Taylor and what happened to her As you know, there was a no-knock warrant issued for her address due to an association with someone who was suspected in a drug case. And of course, it was not correct, and she ended up losing her life. No-knock warrants are search warrants that allow law enforcement to enter a private premise without announcing themselves. Okay? And when we go back to House Bill 670, and reading into this bill, like I said, about the certain circumstances, here's the actual verbiage. Reasonable suspicion to believe clear and convincing evidence that if this warrant is not granted, that there would be property destruction or hiding of property, and that lives might be in danger. That's what it says. Okay? Well, we all know what happened as a result, or part of the result, of Breonna Taylor. I mean, a lot more. This became a larger issue. And, you know, Louisville banned no-knocks from their police. So their police officers are no longer allowed to conduct those. But that doesn't really stop things, because police carry out about 200,000 raids in the U.S. every year. Also, there's no database to track the number of deaths, or either civilian or police officers as raids occur. So there's nothing really to substantiate or say these are helping to fight crime, or this not helping to say, you know, how many folks are actually losing their lives because police knocked on the wrong door. I mean, there are potentially other examples or incidences of something similar that happened to Breonna Taylor happening to other folks. So, but there's nothing to really fully substantiate that. And this is actually a theme. So as we're thinking about this lack of governance, this lack of data and information, let's talk about canine dog attacks. Canine dog attacks. In case you didn't know, a canine is a dog. So let's talk about that. So we're talking about another aspect of police accountability. And police dogs are just one of the many tools that police officers have at their disposal, because you should also be aware that the police are actually very militarized. They have a lot of things at their disposal, a lot of, you know, they have an arsenal of weapons, of gear to wear that's being provided to them. So let's use another quick case study. So in Montgomery, Alabama, there was a 911 call placed to report a burglary. The police officer and his canine arrive on the scene to investigate, and the dog attacks an unarmed 51-year-old black man named Joseph Lee Petaway, who, due to his injuries, bled to death because the dog who attacked him tore an artery in his groin. Through my research so far, there aren't many fatal animal attacks like the case of Joseph Lee, but they do occur. And the bites and the subsequent injuries from them is not, I don't know I don't know what people think, like when they think about getting attacked by a dog, but it's not no little bit of stuff, right? And actually, the way that they are described, they're described more like a shark bite. So that's why I call this episode The Jaws. Spoiler. I mean, that movie didn't really move me, not gonna lie. It was all right. I liked it, you know, but it didn't move me. But I think that's a conversation for another time. So back on deck. So what we are not surprised about, based upon what I've just talked about, is that there's not really much oversight when it comes to dog attacks. Based upon research conducted as part of the Marshall Project, there were some interesting facts. Some things that are not very surprising, though. Some cities had higher incidences of dog attacks than others, right? No surprises. So cities like Jacksonville, Florida, Los Angeles, California, and Indianapolis, Indiana. Most of the attacks by dogs are men. Men are the victims. And highest by race, no effing surprises, are black men. And dog bites cause serious damage, as I mentioned, and many of the people who have survived them have severe PTSD. And very little happens. Very little occurs to really give the folks who were attacked and who were victims, it gives them very little to hold up in court. And so there's really no accountability for the dog or the police officer either. So, we've come into the crossroads, and I started this show talking about police accountability and the bills going on right now, and then also bringing into the subject about dog attacks. And I mentioned that there is no way to track all of this data so that civil action can be, if civil action is recorded, there's not anything that is being created or established so we can actually keep an eye on what's going on. I mean, complaints are being made, but they're not always available to the public because that can be considered to be personnel, which is a part of a person or a police officer's personnel file, which is not subject to public view. But they can also decide that if they want to leave and go to another county or go to another state, there's nothing to track or trace them. So even if it's usually an after fact. It's after the fact, after someone's house has been murdered by a police officer, that it's like, oh, well, this guy actually has done this a couple times. And you're like, oh, word? Just so you know, we don't really have a way to track dog bites. And law enforcement employs 15,000 dogs, according to the U.S. Police Canine Association. Didn't know they existed. So there's a complete lack of transparency, and there's a complete lack of data available to actually track and monitor, who is in our streets, who is still being allowed to have a job and kill someone else, in essence. And, in talking about the no-knock warrants and how, like, some states, there's the majority of the states, 33, I believe, issue no-knock warrants. The only state that does not is Oregon. And even though Maryland is changing its law by introducing this bill regarding the no-knock warrant and giving it some specifications, it still is up to the police officer and to determine what they deem to be a threat. And what if they're wrong? So these are all things that reading the language in that particular bill, I just say that it's not stringent enough and definitely leaves enough open for something to possibly go awry. And this is why we really have to be urging for legislation about community-based policing. And I'm not talking about police officers going around to businesses. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm not saying that's a step in the right direction. But that is not exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, when I say community-based policing, and I'm saying this like this because when I was wanting to make sure I got my talking points together, of course. So I was looking up community-based policing, and I was probably using the wrong, but I really found it very interesting that what came up, because it was really just police officers being in the community. While I think that's a great start, I have to admit that I don't believe that's strong enough. I don't believe that's strong enough. Going back to Oregon very quickly, in a very small town there, they have replaced some of the police officers with mental health workers. And it's been something that's been in practice for the last 30 years. They've got medics and mental health professionals that respond to calls that are aligned with their specialty, and those calls are not going to police officers. This program is called CAHOOTS, and there's a similar one in Stockholm, Sweden. So why am I saying all this? I'm saying this because other countries have a completely different approach to policing than we have in the United States. We spend 1% of our GDP on law enforcement. And on top of all these things, there's nothing cohesive to govern it all. There are so many police stations by state, by county, and smaller municipalities. And there's no universal way to track what's going on, to track people's, and the government has that to a degree, no offense, but the government has that. Why is it that the same activities are occurring? They're still, with respect to the protection of property, which is in essence what the police were for. And don't get it messed up. It is still Black History Month. So the property was Black bodies. So we're clear. Anyhow, so, yet I digress. The point I'm trying to make is that there's nothing that we can use for accountability. We're relying on folks who are doing their research, the things that we are compiling and getting to see, such as the information from the Marshall Project, which I recommend folks take a look at. But there is nothing across the board that can tell us exactly how many people have been attacked by dogs, if those people were actually innocent or not, if they received any restitution. There's no answers there. So that is why I bring all this up today. I've just added more bills to my plate, and that is okay with me. And now let's move on to some shout outs. First of all, I want to give a shout out to the White Bird Clinic. That's the clinic in Oregon that supports the CAHOOTS program that I mentioned. I do have a few delegates that I want to give some shout outs to. Definitely Delegate Adrian Jones. Shout out to Fulfillery. I saw it was our 1 year anniversary since we recorded the episode Change Your Algorithm, which to date is still one of the highest listened to shows, one of the most popular shows. So I wanted to say a shout out to them. I'm very hopeful that we'll get them back on the show very soon, having some new perspectives and new things to talk about. And last but not least, thank you to the sponsor of this week's show and probably the week's show, D&H Hair Care. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram. And if you use the code CRP10, you can get 10% off your order. All right. Thank you all for joining me, and I will see you at the crossroads.